The world was ice and silence. The last thing I remembered was the look in his eyes, not the boy I'd grown up with, but a stranger wearing his face, a cold, calculating stranger who told me I knew too much. Then the sharp sting in my neck, the world tilting, and the bitter taste of wolfsbane flooding my mouth, caging my wolf deep inside where she couldn't help me. Then the shove, the crunch of snow and bone. Now I lay in a frozen ditch by a forgotten forest road, my white mating dress, meant for a celebration, soaked through with blood and melted snow. My leg was twisted beneath me, screaming with a pain that even the wolfsbane couldn't fully mute. The cold had stopped hurting an hour ago. That was the worst sign of all. It meant my body was giving up. My name is Syra, and I was supposed to be Beta Asher's bride. Instead, I was his secret, left to die in the storm. It had all started 3 days ago. The mating ceremony was set, the feast prepared. In a moment of foolish nostalgia, I'd slipped into the old Alpha's study, wanting to see the portrait of my mother that still hung there. Behind it, I'd found the hidden compartment, and inside, the ledgers. Page after page of numbers that lied. Funds meant for widows and orphans, for the elderly and the sick. Diverted, stolen, erased. The Hunter family, Asher's family, wasn't just leading our pack, the Silver Fang pack, they were bleeding it dry. When I confronted Asher, my voice shaking with betrayed fury, he hadn't denied it. He just smiled that charming, empty smile and offered me a choice. Accept his mark at the ceremony, become my Luna and keep my pretty mouth shut. Or I'd chosen or. I told him I would go to the Interpack Council. I would tell them everything. He'd called that brave. He also called it a death sentence. The romantic carriage ride was his solution. One last chance to change my mind, he said. The storm had been brewing, the perfect cover. When I refused again, the needle pricked my neck. Wolfsbane. Then his hands shoving me into the blinding, frozen dark. A sob caught in my throat, but it came out as a weak, frosty puff of air. I was so tired. My wolf, my beautiful silver she-wolf, was just a faint, pained whisper in my soul, poisoned and trapped. I'm so sorry, I thought to her. I'm so sorry I failed us. The snow began to fall again, gentle and deadly, starting to blanket me, a fitting shroud. Asher would tell them I'd run away, overcome with nerves. He'd be the heartbroken Beta, and the stolen money would keep flowing. I closed my eyes, ready to let the cold win. That's when I heard it. Not the wind, not the distant howls of the Silver Fang border patrols searching in all the wrong places. Paws. Massive, powerful paws pounding through the deep snow with relentless purpose, coming closer. My heart, which had been slowing, gave a frantic, painful thump. Please, I begged the silent forest, please let it be quick, let it be an animal, not someone who would take me back to Asher. The paws stopped. I forced my eyes open. A wolf stood over me, silhouetted against the gray sky. He was enormous, a beast of midnight black and shadow, larger than any wolf I had ever seen. Power radiated from him in waves, thick and heavy in the air, the undeniable signature of a pure alpha. His eyes glowed like molten mercury in the gloom. And in that moment, something broke open inside me. Something deeper than fear, deeper than the cold, a pull, a recognition, a single undeniable truth that echoed from my soul to his. Mate. The word echoed in the hollows of my mind. My poisoned wolf stirred, pushing against her cage with a desperate, aching whimper. Mate. Safe. But as the massive wolf shifted, bones cracking and reforming with terrifying grace, I realized who the moon goddess had cursed me with. The man who rose from the snow was naked, steam rising from his skin in the frigid air. He was all hard lines and coiled strength, with dark hair and a harsh, handsome face that was etched into my memory from every pack history lesson. Kalen Thorne, the Alpha King of the Northern Territories, the Blood Wolf of Thorn Hall, the man whose father my pack had killed in a bloody border war 20 years ago, the man who, legend said, had sworn over his father's corpse to see every last Silver Fang wolf wiped from the earth. My enemy, my destined mate. He dressed quickly in clothes pulled from a pack stashed nearby, his movements efficient. Then his silver eyes, now human but no less piercing, locked on me. I saw the exact moment recognition dawned, followed by a storm of conflicting emotions, decades of hatred, alpha duty, shock, and beneath it all, the same impossible pull I felt. His jaw tightened. You. That single word, growled with such intensity, held a lifetime of war. I tried to speak, to beg him to just leave me, but only a pained gasp escaped my cracked lips. He knelt in the snow, his presence overwhelming. His scent, cedar, frost, and wild, untamed power wrapped around me, and my wolf responded with a weak, yearning cry. His hands moved over my injuries, his touch clinical, but surprisingly careful as he assessed the damage. "Wolfsbane," he muttered, his voice like gravel. He looked from my broken body to the forest, his nostrils flaring. Who did this? I couldn't answer. Darkness was clawing at the edges of my vision again. "Don't you dare." His voice cut through the fog, sharp with command. It was an alpha's voice, meant to be obeyed. I wanted to. My eyes fluttered open, meeting his fierce silver gaze. "Good," he said, his tone softening a fraction. He slid his arms under me with immense care, lifting me from my frozen grave. Pain exploded through me, a white-hot agony that stole my breath. But I was cradled against a chest solid as granite, surrounded by his scent. "Stay with me, little wolf," he murmured, his voice a rumble against my ear as he carried me toward a huge, dark stallion that waited patiently. He mounted behind me, holding me securely against him. The heat of his body began to seep into my frozen bones. "The nearest settlement is a hard ride. Can you hold on?" I nodded weakly, my head resting against his shoulder. "Then hold on tight," he said, and we rode into the swirling snow, away from the death Asher had chosen for me, and toward a fate with the one wolf in the world I was never supposed to find. But as the darkness finally took me, one thought echoed. He was my enemy, he was my mate, and he had just saved my life. What cruel game was the moon goddess playing? I awoke to warmth and the soft crackle of a fire. For a blissful, disoriented moment, I thought it had all been a terrible dream. Then pain announced itself, a deep, throbbing ache in my leg, a tight bandage around my ribs, and a dull headache centered on a tender spot at my temple. The scent of herbs and healing ointments filled the air, mixed with something else, cedar and frost. His scent. Memory returned in a cold, sickening rush. The ledgers, Asher's smile, the shove, the snow, and him, Kalen Thorne. I was in a small, clean room in what must have been a remote border outpost. The bed was plain but soft, and a thick fur was tucked around me. By the window, silhouetted against the gray daylight, sat the Alpha King. He turned as soon as I stirred, those mercury eyes missing nothing. "You're awake." His voice was neutral, devoid of the growling intensity from the forest. It made him seem even more dangerous. "How long?" My voice was a ragged whisper. 3 days. The healer says you're fortunate. The wolfsbane is purged, the leg is set. You'll live." He stood and poured a cup of water from a pitcher, bringing it to me. He helped me sit up, his hands impersonal and steady. "Now," he said, returning to his chair, his gaze never leaving my face, "you will tell me why I had to." The command was there, simmering under the surface. I drank slowly, the water a blessing on my dry throat. The dread was a stone in my stomach. I could lie, but to what end? "Asher," I said, the name tasting like ash, "the beta of Silver Fang Pact." Something dark flickered in his eyes, recognition and a cold, sharp interest. "The Silver Fang bride, the one who vanished before the meeting ceremony. Your pack searched, I heard. Or did they?" The question was a blade. I gave a short, bitter laugh that hurt my ribs. "How thoroughly did they search, Your Majesty?" "Asher told them I ran away, that I was too fragile, too human to handle mating a beta. But that's not what happened. It wasn't a question." I looked into the flames, gathering my strength. "I found records, hidden in Alpha Wriggle's study. They were stealing from everyone. The pension funds, the orphan stipends, the elder care allowances. All of it, siphoned away for years." The anger, fresh and hot, pushed the weakness back. When I told Asher I couldn't accept his mark unless he made it right, he decided I was a problem that needed to disappear. "And you believed him when he suggested a carriage ride after that?" "I wanted to believe people could be better," I said, meeting his eyes. Clearly, I was a fool. For a long moment, he just studied me. Then a ghost of something, not a smile, but a sharp expression of understanding crossed his face. "You threatened to expose the hunters. You have proof?" I saw the ledgers. I remember names, dates, amounts, but the books themselves, Asher has them, or has destroyed them by now. "But your testimony could wound them, if anyone would believe a woman with no status running from her own mating." "Exactly," I whispered, the hopelessness of it washing over me again. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. The air in the room seemed to tighten. "What if someone with considerable credibility backed your claims?" "Like who?" "Like me." My heart stuttered. "Why would you do that?" "Because the Silver Fang Pact has been a thorn in my territory's side for 2 decades. They killed my father. They've sabotaged treaties, raided our borders, and poisoned alliances." His voice was low and utterly certain. "You have information I need, and you need protection they cannot penetrate. We can help each other." "What are you suggesting?" "Accept my mark." The words hung in the air, senseless. I stared at him. "You can't be serious." "I am always serious about strategy," he said, his expression unchanging. "Become my Luna. Under my protection, Asher cannot touch you. In return, you help me build a case against your former pact. We dismantle them together, piece by piece." The sheer, cold audacity of it left me breathless. "That's insane." "It's practical," he countered, standing. "You have no family to shelter you. If you go back, Asher finishes what he started. If you run, you'll be looking over your shoulder for the rest of your short life. But as my mate, as Luna of the Northern Territories, you are beyond his reach." "You don't even know me." "I know enough," he said, walking to the window. "You chose conscience over comfort. You threatened a powerful family because it was right. You survived a wolfsbane poisoning and a snowstorm. I've spent 20 years playing political games with these people. You took direct action. I can use that." "This isn't about love," I said, the words feeling hollow. "No," he agreed, glancing back. "And I don't love you. This is about survival and justice." He laid out the terms like a general planning a campaign. Separate quarters at his fortress, Thorn Hall. A public facade of a respectful mating. In private, a partnership focused on one goal, the downfall of Silver Fang. And if I refuse? I asked, my voice small. Then I pay the healer and I leave you here. But know this, Syra. Asher believes you're dead. The moment you surface, that changes. He will come for you, and next time, I won't be there. I thought of Asher's eyes, so cold in the carriage. I thought of widows like Ilara who'd lost everything. I thought of the silent, snowy grave I'd just escaped. If I do this, I said slowly, forcing strength into my voice, I want your word. We pursue justice for the families they harmed, not just revenge for your father. Justice. For the first time, something like respect crossed his stern features. Agreed. Justice, not just revenge. One more condition, I said, holding his gaze. If this arrangement ever puts you or your pact in true danger because of me, you let me go. No arguments. He considered this, then gave a single, sharp nod. I promise. He approached the bed and extended his hand. It was strong, scarred across the knuckles. This was the hand of the enemy, the hand that had pulled me from the snow, the hand that now offered a crown made of thorns. My wolf, still weak, pressed against my mind with a soft, trusting sigh. Mate. Safe. I took his hand. His grip was firm, warm, and final. We have an agreement. Then rest, he said, releasing me. When you can travel, I'll take you to Thorn Hall. We have work to do. He moved toward the door. Your Majesty, I called out. He paused, looking back. Why were you on that road, in the middle of a storm? His expression shifted just for a second. Something vulnerable and haunted flickered beneath the iron control. I was returning from the northern graves. I visit my father's cairn on the anniversary of his death. That road is the fastest route, even in winter. He opened the door. I don't believe in fate, Syra, but I am grateful my path crossed yours that day. Then he was gone, leaving me alone with the fire and the crushing weight of the bargain I had just made. I had traded a death in the cold for a life down to a wolf made of ice and vengeance. I prayed to the moon goddess I had chosen the right enemy. The journey to Thorn Hall took 2 days by guarded carriage. Kalen rode alongside on his black stallion, a silent, watchful shadow. He was a careful guardian, ensuring I ate, that the healer changed my bandages, that I had extra blankets. But he never spoke unless necessary, never asked about my life before, never offered a single personal detail. It was like being escorted by a beautifully carved statue, powerful, impressive, and utterly remote. On the evening of the second day, we crested a hill and my breath caught. I had expected a manor, a castle, perhaps. Thorn Hall was a fortress carved from the mountain itself. Gray stone walls, blackened by time and weather, rose like sheer cliffs, topped with sharp crenellations. Narrow windows glared down at the world like suspicious eyes. It was massive, imposing, and radiated a sense of age and unshakable power. It didn't welcome you. It dared you to approach. I searched for a word. Defensible, Kalen finished, opening the carriage door. It has stood for 3 centuries. No enemy has ever taken it. Can you walk? I can manage, I said, though my leg protested. His hand stayed on my elbow, steadying me. The moment my feet touched the ground, the great iron-bound doors of the fortress groaned open. Dozens of wolves streamed out, warriors, elders, mothers with pups, forming 2 silent, staring lines. I froze. I thought this would be private. The marking ceremony will be, Kalen said, his voice low. But the pack needs to see their new Luna. Remember, you are not a victim here. You are a survivor. Stand like it. I drew myself up, ignoring the pain, channeling every shred of dignity my mother had ever taught me. I took his offered arm, and we walked forward. At the front of the assembly stood a woman with steel-gray hair tied in a severe knot and a spine as straight as a spear. She bowed precisely. Your Majesty, "Welcome home." Kaelin nodded. "This is Syra. She will be our Luna. She is recovering. See to her needs." Lyra's sharp, assessing eyes took in my splinted leg, my fading bruises, the careful way I held myself. Something, approval perhaps, flashed in their depths. "Of course, Your Majesty. Welcome to Thorn Hall, Luna Syra. We are honored." "Thank you, Lyra," I said, keeping my voice even. "I look forward to learning from you all." It was a simple, diplomatic response, but Lyra's mouth softened almost imperceptibly. Kaelin released my arm. "Lyra will show you to your quarters. Rest tonight. Tomorrow we begin." He walked away without another word, disappearing into the shadowed mouth of the hall. Lyra cleared her throat. "This way, Luna." The interior was exactly as foreboding as the exterior. Stone floors, dark wood, tapestries depicting battles and stern-faced Thorn ancestors. The Alpha King's quarters are in the west wing. You will be in the east. He values his privacy. "And what does he value in a Luna?" I asked. Lyra paused, her hand on a heavy oak door. She looked at me, and her gaze held a trace of sympathy. "Truthfully, Luna, I do not know. We've never had one. His father died before finding his mate, and King Kaelin has refused every alliance match the council has ever proposed." She opened the door. "These are your rooms. I hope they suit." The word rooms was an understatement. It was a small apartment, a sitting room with a fireplace, a bedroom with a large canopied bed, a dressing room, and a private bathing chamber. It was austere, built for strength, not luxury, but it was clean, warm, and safe. "It's overwhelming," I admitted. "You will adjust," Lyra said. She moved to stir the fire. "The Alpha King has arranged for a seamstress. You will need suitable gowns. There will also be instructors, pack law, territory history, combat training." "Combat?" I asked. "A Luna must be able to defend her pack," she said simply. "You have 6 weeks until the Interpack Council gathering, where you will be formally presented. 6 weeks to become who you need to be." 6 weeks. The weight of it settled on my shoulders. After Lyra left, a young Omega girl brought a dinner tray and a small leather-bound book. "From the Alpha King, Luna. He said you should read it tonight." Alone, I opened it. The handwriting was bold and precise. "Syra, the next 6 weeks will be challenging. I am not a patient teacher, but I believe you are capable. This book contains what you need to know about Thorn Hall, its laws, and your role. Study it. Your survival depends on understanding this world. We will dine together each evening at 8. Be punctual. We will discuss your progress and our strategy. Remember our agreement. You help me destroy them, I keep you safe. Everything else is negotiable. Kaelin." I closed the book and looked out the window at the darkening forest. Somewhere out there, Asher thought my bones were being picked clean by scavengers. Good. Let him believe that. Because here, in the heart of my enemy's territory, I was going to learn how to become something he could never touch. And then I was going to help tear his world apart. The next 3 weeks were a blur of pain, ink, and relentless instruction. My days began before dawn. First, history and law with Uriel, an ancient scholar with eyes like chips of flint. He drilled me on treaties, territorial lines, and the complex, bloody history between the Thorn and Silverfang packs. "To understand the present, you must understand the first betrayal," he would intone, pointing to maps scarred with old battles. Next, combat. My instructor was Garrett, a warrior with a face like weathered stone and a voice that could command an avalanche. My leg was still tender, but he had me sparring anyway. "Pain is a teacher," he grunted after I hit the training mats for the 10th time. "A Luna protects with wisdom, but she must also protect with her teeth. Your enemies will not fight fair. Learn to be unfair first." Lyra taught me the quiet, essential arts of running a pack, mediating disputes between farmers over land, organizing the harvest stores, listening to the worries of new mothers and anxious elders. It was the work that kept a pack alive when the Alpha was waging wars on borders. And every night at 8, I dined with Kaylin. We sat at opposite ends of a table long enough to seat 50. The distance felt symbolic. The conversations were clinical. "Report on your progress with Uriel," he would say, not looking down from his plate. I would detail what I'd learned about the trade disputes of 50 years ago. He would listen, ask a sharp question, then move on. "And Garrett, can you disarm an opponent yet?" "Not yet," I admitted, frustration simmering. "You will." We discussed strategy against Silverfang. I repeated everything I remembered from the ledgers. He took notes in a small book, cross-referencing with other information. It was like being a weapon he was patiently sharpening. The only thing we never discussed was the bond. It hummed between us constantly, a live wire of awareness. Every time he entered a room, my wolf sat up, yearning. His scent, cedar and frost, wound through my senses, whispering, "Mate, home, safe." But he gave no sign he felt it, no touch beyond what was necessary, no softening of his steel-plated demeanor. On the 20th day, as we ate in our usual stiff silence, he set down his cutlery. "The Interpack Council meeting is confirmed. In 3 weeks. Silverfang will be there." A chill that had nothing to do with the drafty hall went through me. "So soon?" "So soon," he confirmed, his silver eyes catching the candlelight. "You will stand beside me as my Luna. You will let Asher Hunter see that the woman he discarded has become the one thing he can never have." "What if he tries to discredit me? He'll say I'm lying for revenge." "He will try," Kaylin agreed. "You will remain calm. You will state facts. We have the refugee testimonies now, the patterns. We will present evidence, not emotion." He paused. "Will it be enough?" "It has to be," I whispered. "It will," he said, and his voice carried the weight of a vow. "Because if the council fails to deliver justice, I will, and that will mean war." Later that night, restless, I stood at my window. The marking ceremony was days away, the final, irreversible step. I should have been terrified. Instead, I felt a strange, fierce clarity. Asher had tried to erase me. Kaylin was giving me a chance to etch my name in stone. A soft knock sounded at my door. It was late. "Come in." Kaylin entered. He was dressed down, a simple tunic and trousers, his hair slightly unruly as if he'd been running his hands through it. He'd never come to my rooms before. "You're awake," he stated. "As are you." He came to stand by the window, keeping a careful distance. "The bond," he said abruptly, his voice low. "It is distracting." My heart leapt into my throat. "You feel it?" He admitted, the words seeming ripped from him. "It is a constant pull, an itch in my blood. My wolf is not pleased with my restraint." Why show restraint? The question was out before I could stop it. He turned, and his eyes glowed faintly in the dark. "Because, Syra, you were left for dead by a man you trusted. You were brought here for strategy, not because of some moon-given pull. To act on the bond now would be to take advantage, and I am many things, but I am not that." The raw honesty of it stunned me. In his own harsh way, he was trying to protect me, even from himself. "I am not made of glass, Your Majesty." He is aware. He gave a ghost of something like humor in his tone. "You are made of stubbornness and fractured bone, a dangerous combination." He grew serious again. "The marking will intensify the connection. It will be profound. I need you to be certain." I looked at him. This enemy, this protector, this lonely king in his fortress of stone. "I am certain of the agreement we made. I am certain I want justice. The rest," I shrugged, the motion feeling strangely free. "The rest we will figure out." He studied me for a long moment, then gave a single sharp nod. "Then we proceed." He moved to leave, then stopped at the door. "Get some rest, Syra. The most difficult lessons are yet to come." After he left, I placed my hand over my heart, feeling the steady, strong pulse of the mate bond alongside my own. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was a promise, and for the first time since the snow, that promise felt like it might just be enough. The ceremony took place under a full moon in a sacred grove within Thornhall's walls. Ancient oaks, bare and silvered by winter, formed a silent circle around a stone altar older than the fortress itself. I wore a simple gown of deep blue-gray, the color of a winter twilight. My shoulders were bare. My hair, unbound as tradition demanded, fell around me like a cloak. Lyra fastened a silver torque around my neck, etched with the Thornhall crest, a wolf's head encircled by brambles. "Nervous?" Lyra asked, her fingers surprisingly gentle. "Terrified," I confessed. "Good. That means you understand the weight of what you are doing." Lyra adjusted the torque. "The mark is forever. You will feel his joy, his pain, his rage, and he will feel yours. There is no hiding after this." "Do you think it's a mistake?" I asked the stern woman who had become my closest guide. Lyra considered me. "The moon goddess does not make mistakes with true mates, but she does enjoy challenges. You two are certainly that." She gave my hand a brief, firm squeeze. "Now go. Your alpha is waiting." The pack was gathered, a sea of silent, watching faces. At the center, by the altar, stood Kalen. He wore only black trousers, his torso bare and marked with the scars of his reign. His expression was unreadable, but his silver eyes burned like captured starlight. I walked to him, the eyes of the pack heavy upon me. The bond between us was a taut wire, vibrating with potential energy. When I reached him, he extended his hand. I took it. His skin was warm, his grip firm. Uriel, acting as shaman, stepped forward. "Under the witness of the moon goddess and this pack, Alpha Kalen Thorn claims Syra as his fated mate. Does any challenge this bond?" The silence was absolute. "Syra," Uriel's old voice rang out, "do you accept this Alpha as your mate? Do you bind your wolf to his? Do you accept his mark and offer yours in return?" I looked into Kalen's eyes. I saw the war there, the strategist, the lonely king, the wolf who recognized its other half. I felt the bond, urgent and undeniable. This was the path I had chosen, not for love, but for life, for justice. I accept. A collective breath seemed to sweep through the grove. Kalen's hand tightened mine. "Shift," Uriel commanded. The change swept over me, a welcome release. My silver wolf sprang forward, shaking out her coat. Across from me, Kalen's shift was a breathtaking display of power. A massive black wolf, larger than any in the circle, his presence dominating the air. Our wolves approached each other. His circled mine, a display of dominance and possession. My wolf, in a gesture of ultimate trust, rolled slightly, exposing her throat. He bent his great head, his jaws closing with infinite care over the fur and skin at my neck. The marking. It was not pain, but something deeper, a surge of pure, wild magic. It burned through my veins like silver fire, etching his scent, his essence, his claim into my very soul. I felt it settle, permanent and right. Then it was my turn. To the pack's audible shock, the great black alpha wolf lowered his head, submitting to me. I stepped forward and marked him in return. My teeth finding the juncture of his neck and shoulder, the taste of his blood was winter and cedar and power. As I completed the mark, a flash of silver light burst from our joined forms, illuminating the entire grove. The bond, now fully formed, clicked into place. It was no longer just a pull, it was a connection, a shared space in our souls. We shifted back. On my throat, just above the torque, a crescent-shaped scar glowed with a faint silver light. Its twin shimmered on Kalen's throat. Uriel's voice rose triumphantly. The Alpha King and his Luna Queen, bound by fate, marked by choice, witnessed by the pack. The howl that erupted shook the snow from the branches. It was celebration, acceptance, and a declaration to the world. Kalen's hand found mine again. Through the new, profound depth of the bond, I felt his satisfaction, his fierce pride, and something else, a warmth, a protectiveness that felt less like strategy and more like possession of something precious. The celebration in the great hall was loud and vibrant, but we slipped away early. Tradition allowed the newly marked pair privacy. At the door to the west wing, Kalen stopped. "Your rooms are in the east," he said, his voice unusually quiet, "if that is what you prefer." After the intensity of the marking, his continued offer of choice undid me. "We are marked, Kalen. The bond is complete." "It is," he agreed, "but that does not mean obligation." I took his hand. "Show me your rooms." Something ignited in his eyes. He led me to his chambers, a larger, sparser version of my own, dominated by a huge fireplace and a wide bed draped in dark furs. The moment the door closed, the careful control between us shattered, not in passion, but in a profound, wordless acknowledgement. He didn't kiss me. Instead, he pulled me into an embrace, his arms wrapping around me with a strength that felt like sanctuary. I buried my face against his chest, breathing in the scent that was now forever a part of me. Through the bond, I felt the storm inside him finally calm. The constant wariness eased. I felt his relief, his fierce, unwavering protectiveness, and a deep, echoing loneliness that was now thankfully beginning to fade. "No regrets?" he murmured into my hair. "No regrets," I whispered back. And it was the truth. We stood there for a long time, two wounded wolves in a fortress of stone, bound by a mark and a bargain with a war ahead of us. But for that one silent night, the only battle that mattered was over. We had both survived, and now we were no longer alone. The council hall of the neutral grounds was a monument to fragile peace. Built of pale stone on land claimed by no pack, it was a place of words, not claws. Today, those words would decide fates. I stood beside Kalen in an antechamber, my gown the deep blue of the Thornhall crest, the mate mark glowing softly at my throat. Through the new, profound depth of our bond, I felt his focus, sharp as a blade, and beneath it, a steady, protective warmth that was for me alone. "Remember," he said, his voice low, "you are not the accused. You are the witness. You are Luna of the Northern Territories. Stand like it." The great doors opened. The herald's voice boomed. "Alpha King Kalen Thorn of the Northern Territories and his Luna Syra." A sea of faces turned, alphas, lunas, betas from 24 packs. The air was thick with dominance, suspicion, and curiosity. And then I found them. Across the hall, the Silver Fang delegation. Alpha Rigel Hunter, looking older and wearier than I remembered. Luna Celeste, her face a mask of icy composure. And Asher. Our eyes met. His handsome face, which I once thought kind, went slack with pure, undiluted shock. It morphed into confusion, then dawning horror, and finally, a venomous hatred that made my wolf snarl silently. He saw the mark on my throat. He understood exactly what it meant. Council Head Alistair Vance, an ancient wolf with eyes like river stones, called for order. "We gather to address grave concerns regarding the Silver Fang Pack's governance. Alpha King Kalen Thorn of the Northern Territories, you bring serious allegations." Kalen stepped forward, his presence commanding the vast space. "I do. Allegations of systematic corruption, embezzlement from pack funds, and the attempted murder of my fated mate, Luna Syra, formerly of Silver Fang." The hall erupted. Asher shot to his feet. Lies! This is a pathetic fabrication. She ran from our mating out of cowardice and has clearly sold herself to our oldest enemy for protection. Then explain the wolfsbane in her system when I found her half frozen on my border. Explain the injuries consistent with a fall from a moving carriage. Explain why a coward would seek out the one wolf in the world your pack fears. She is unstable. She seeks revenge for a perceived slight. The only thing I perceive is the truth, and my voice, clear and steady, silenced the murmurs. All eyes swung to me. My heart hammered, but I clung to the solid anchor of Kaelin through our bond. I found the ledgers in Alpha Rigel's study. I saw the numbers, the widow's fund, the orphan's tithe, the elder's grain, all siphoned into private holdings. When I confronted Beta Asher, he gave me a choice, silence or death. He chose for me when he pushed me into the snow. A fantastical story from a scorned female. Luna Celeste's voice was a whip-crack. Where is your proof? Where are these mythical ledgers? The ledgers are gone, but memory remains. I can name the accounts. I can describe the forgeries. I looked past her to the other packs, and we are not the only witnesses. Kaelin nodded. The side doors opened. In walked Ilara, the widow, her face lined with grief and new courage. With her were others, a young mother, an elderly warrior, faces from Silverfang I recognized as good, honest wolves who had been struggling in silence. One by one, they spoke. They spoke of missing funds, of threats when they asked questions, of the sudden fearful flight they'd had to make when Asher began to clean house after my disappearance. Their testimony was quiet, raw, and utterly damning. Asher's mask of outrage began to crack, revealing the panic beneath. Alpha Rigel looked at his son, and for the first time I saw not pride, but a horrified realization. Then, Council Investigator Oren stepped forward, a leather satchel in hand. Council Head, with permission, our own audit, initiated after anonymous tips, confirms financial irregularities on a massive scale. The pattern matches Luna Cyrus' testimony perfectly. He laid out documents, bank transfers, falsified reports. The evidence was no longer just words, it was ink and seal. Alistair Vance's face was grim. Beta Asher Hunter, these charges are severe. Embezzlement from your pack, conspiracy, attempted mate murder, the most sacred crime among us. How do you answer? Asher looked around the hall, at the cold faces of the other alphas, at his father's crumbling visage, at my unwavering gaze beside the imposing Alpha King. He had no allies here, only the truth closing in, like jaws. His control snapped. She was going to ruin everything, he shouted, the words bursting out of him. One silly female poking her nose where it didn't belong. The pack's wealth was being used to secure our future, our power. She understood nothing. She was a tool that became a liability. A deathly silence followed his confession. He had said the quiet part out loud, in front of everyone. Alistair Vance stood, his authority final. Beta Asher Hunter, by your own words, you are condemned. You are stripped of rank and title. For your crimes against your pack and the sacred mate bond, you are sentenced to life exile in the barren ice fields, never to shift, never to know pack again. Guards moved forward. Asher fought, a wild, desperate thing, but he was overpowered. As he was dragged away, he locked eyes with me one last time, his scream echoing in the hall. "This isn't over, Syra. You will regret this." His parents were led away separately, faces ashen, their legacy in ruins. The council head turned to Kaelin and me. The Silverfang pack is now under council stewardship. Its assets will be restored to its wronged members. Justice, he said, with a respectful nod to me, has been served. We had won, publicly, decisively. As we left the hall, other alphas approached offering wary respect. The balance of power had shifted. But back in our carriage, Kaelin's hand was tight on mine. Through the bond, I felt no triumph, only a heightened, razor-sharp vigilance. "It's not over, is it?" I asked quietly. "No," he said, watching the forest pass. "Asher is broken, but his mother, Luna Celeste, is cunning, and a cornered wolf is the most dangerous kind. They will not accept this end. They will come for what they see as the cause of their ruin. For me?" His silver eyes met mine, full of a fierce, terrifying certainty. "For us, and we will be ready." Thorn Hall became both home and fortress. In the weeks following the council, we integrated the Silverfang refugees who chose to stay. They worked alongside thorn wolves, the old enmity slowly softening into shared labor. I spent my days in the new Sanctuary Wing, a project of my own making, a place for any wolf in need from any pack. It was filled with the displaced, the hurt, the hidden. Kalen supported it, though through the bond I felt his constant gnawing worry. Every new face was a potential threat in his eyes. His protectiveness was a wall around me, sometimes comforting, sometimes suffocating. The attack came not at me, but at the very idea of our sanctuary. It was market day in the lower village. Wolves from our pack and neighboring allies traded peacefully. I was there with Lyra, inspecting wool from the Highland shepherds, laughing for what felt like the first time in forever. The first arrow took our sentry in the shoulder. The second thudded into a post beside my head. Chaos erupted. Snarling wolves in unmarked gray tunics poured from the tree line, mercenaries. They didn't try to breach the hall. They targeted the village, the mills, the outlying farms. They aimed for chaos, for fear, for proof that Thorn Hall's reach was limited. "To the hall!" Garrett roared, forming a shield wall around me. "No," I shouted, my Luna's voice cutting through the panic. "Get the children and the elders to the cellar. Warriors, with me, protect the granary." I didn't think. I acted. My wolf surged forward, and I shifted in a flash of silver. I was not the largest fighter, but I was fast. I darted between snarling mercenaries, not to kill, but to disrupt, to lead them away from the fleeing families. I felt Kalen's roar of fury through the bond a second before I saw him, a black avalanche of vengeance plow into the heart of the fight. But the attack was a diversion. As Kalen and our warriors cleaved through the mercenaries, a smaller, faster group slipped around the fray. Their target was clear, the Sanctuary Wing, the symbol of my vulnerability and his supposed weakness. I broke away, racing up the hill toward the hall, my heart a drum of terror. I burst into the sanctuary's common room to find 3 gray-clad wolves holding a knife to the throat of Tamlin, a young, blind Omega from a western pack who wove beautiful baskets. "Call off your alpha, or the cripple dies." Rage, cold and pure, washed over me. This was my home. These were my wolves. I said, my human voice deadly calm. "I am not a bargaining chip. I am the Luna of Thorn Hall." I didn't shift. I picked up a heavy iron poker from the hearth. The mercenary laughed, a cruel sound. He never saw Garrett, who had followed me, come through the window behind him. The fight was short and brutal. After, as we tended the wounded and secured the hall, Kalen found me. I was washing soot from my hands, my body trembling with spent adrenaline. He stood in the doorway, his clothes torn, a cut on his brow. Through the bond, I felt a cataclysm of emotion, fury at the attack, terror that had choked him when he felt my fear, and a roaring, overwhelming pride. He crossed the room in 2 strides. He didn't embrace me. He simply stood before me, his hands coming up to frame my face, his forehead resting against mine. It was the most intimate gesture we had ever shared. "You are magnificent," he breathed, his voice rough, "and you terrified me." "They were in our home," I whispered. "I know." He pulled back, his silver eyes searching mine. This was Celeste's work, a message. She is telling us that our peace is an illusion, that she can reach what we love. Then we make it harder to reach. We don't hide, we fortify. We train everyone, omegas, elders, children in basic defense. We make Thorn Hall not just a fortress of stone, but a fortress of wolves. A slow, real smile touched his lips, the first I'd ever seen. It transformed his harsh face. "When did you become the strategist?" he asked. "I learned from the best," I said. And in that moment, surrounded by the scent of smoke and pine, with his forehead against mine, the bond sang with something that was no longer just duty or strategy. It was partnership. It was respect. It was the beginning of everything. Winter tightened its grip, and with it came a new kind of silence. The attacks ceased. The borders were calm. It was as if the storm had passed. But the bond between Kaylin and I thrummed with a shared unease. Calm was not Celeste Hunter's way. The news came by Eagle from the North Watch. Asher had escaped his exile. He hadn't broken out of the ice fields. He'd been broken out by a band of rogue wolves loyal to silver, not to any pack, but to coin. And the coin, the watch commander deduced, bore a faded Miedmont for the Fenter family's old treasury. "She didn't just want to scare us," Kaylin said, staring at the report in his study. The firelight danced over his stern features. "She was buying time. She needed her son back." "Why?" I asked, wrapping a shawl tighter around my shoulders. "He's broken, disgraced. What use is he to her now?" "Revenge is a use," Kaylin said darkly, "and a son, however flawed, is a piece on the board. She is planning something that requires his hatred of you as a catalyst." A few nights later, the dream came, not a dream of memory, but of the bond, a twisted, nightmarish echo. I felt a searing, phantom pain in my marked shoulder, and through it, a wave of corrosive hatred that was not my own. I woke with a gasp, my mate mark on my throat burning ice cold. Kaylin was already awake, sitting beside me, his hand over his own mark. His face was pale. "You felt it. What was that?" "A death," he whispered, "a violent, angry death. Somewhere far away, a mated pair was killed. The bond, it screamed, and we felt the echo." He looked at me, his eyes haunted. "The bond network connects all mated pairs, however faintly. A rupture that violent, it sends a shockwave." The next morning, the grim news confirmed it. A mated pair from a small, neutral pack near the old Silverfang border had been found slaughtered in their home. The method was brutal, meant to send a message, and carved on their cabin door was a crude symbol, a crescent moon dripping with thorns. It was a perversion of our marks, a declaration of war not on a pack, but on the mate bond itself. "She's not just coming for us," I realized, cold dread settling in my stomach. "She's making it about us. She's telling every pack that our union, the Thorn and the former Silverfang, is a curse, that it brings death." Kaylin's jaw was clenched so tight I heard his teeth grind. "She is trying to isolate us, to turn other packs' fear against us." He slammed a fist on the table. "We must find her. We must end this." But finding a ghost was impossible. Celeste had vanished, and Asher with her. They were shadows, striking from the darkness and disappearing. The pressure mounted. Whispers began among the lesser packs. Was the Thorn King's mating truly blessed, or had it unleashed an old blood feud that would consume them all? Our allies grew hesitant. The weight of it settled on Kaylin. I saw him retreat into the cold, implacable Alpha King, the man who trusted no one. The warm partner who had shared my forehead touch was buried under layers of stone again. It hurt. a sharp ache in my chest that had nothing to do with the bond. One evening, after a particularly tense council with our own worried betas, I confronted him in his study. "You are shutting me out." He didn't look up from his maps. "I am protecting you. By pushing me away, that is not protection, Kaylin. That is a different kind of exile." He finally looked at me, and the raw anguish in his eyes took my breath away. "Every time I let someone in, Syra, they are used against me. My father, my sister, and now you. This bond, it is the greatest vulnerability I have ever known. Celeste knows that. She is targeting it. How do I fight an enemy who aims at my own soul?" I walked to him, took the map from his trembling hands, and placed my palm over his heart. "You fight with your soul beside you, not locked away. My strength is not in my claws, Kaylin. It is here." I pressed my hand harder. "And it is yours. Stop trying to carry the mountain alone. Let me help you bear the weight." The wall around him crumbled. He pulled me into his arms, not in passion, but in desperate, aching need. He held me as if I were the only solid thing in a crumbling world. "I cannot lose you," he murmured into my hair, his voice breaking. "The thought of it, it is a darkness I cannot face." "You won't," I promised, holding him just as tightly. "Because we are not two anymore. We are one pack, one heart, and we will face this darkness together." That night, the plan changed. We would not just hunt Celeste, we would draw her out. We would use the very thing she sought to destroy, our union, as the bait and the weapon. Our plan was audacious, and it terrified every elder on the council. We would host a Founders Moon gathering at Thorn Hall, an event for all allied and neutral packs, a celebration of unity and new beginnings, a blatant display of strength and normalcy, and a perfect target. "It is too dangerous," Garrett growled. "We are inviting the snake into our den." "The snake is already in the garden," Kaylin countered, his voice leaving no room for argument. He stood beside me at the head of the table, our shoulders touching, a united front. "We control the den. We know every stone, every passage. We will be ready." The preparations were a whirlwind. The great hall was decorated with evergreen and silver. The kitchens worked day and night. Warriors trained in new formations, blending into the crowds as guests. The entire pack moved with a focused, quiet energy. Through it all, the bond between Kaylin and I deepened into something unshakable. The shared fear, the shared purpose wore away the last of our strategic distance. We spent our evenings not just planning defenses, but talking about his lonely childhood, my mother's songs, our hopes for a future beyond this war. We walked the battlements together, his hand finding mine in the dark. It was a quiet courtship, born not of flowers, but of shared fortitude. The night of the gathering arrived. The hall was filled with music, light, and the sense of a dozen different packs. I wore a gown of silver gray, and Kaylin wore black, our mate marks openly displayed. We played our parts, the gracious king, the compassionate Luna, the fated pair who had overcome the odds. But beneath the smiles, every sense was heightened. Through the bond, Kaylin and I were a single alert creature. I felt his constant scanning vigilance, and he felt my calm, monitoring gaze as I moved among the guests, listening, watching. It was during the great feast, when the noise was at its peak, that the bond screamed a warning. Not from Kaylin, from the edge of the room, near the servants' entrance. A wave of nausea, of dizzying chemical wrongness. Wolfsbane, strong and being carried inside. My eyes met Kaylin's across the hall. He gave an almost imperceptible nod. The plan was in motion. I excused myself gracefully, Lyra at my side. We moved toward the source, our guards melting from the shadows to flank us. In the dim, cold storeroom corridor, we found them. 2 figures in servants' livery, their eyes too sharp, pouring a dark powder into the great wine tuns meant for the toast. "Stop," I commanded, my Luna's authority ringing in the stone space. They turned, not mercenaries, silver fang wolves I recognized, loyalists to the bitter end. They didn't speak, they attacked. What followed was not a grand battle, it was a swift, brutal struggle in a confined space. Lyra was a whirlwind of aged fury. I fought with the dirty, efficient moves Garrett had drilled me with. But one of them was larger, faster. He got past Lyra, his wolfsbane-dusted blade aimed at my heart. A black shadow intercepted, Kalen. He moved with a speed that defied thought, disarming the wolf and slamming him into the wall with a crack. The fight was over in seconds. But it was again a diversion. As the captured wolves snarled, the main doors of the great hall burst open, not with an army, but with a single figure, Celeste Hunter. She stood framed in the doorway, dressed not in finery, but in worn travel leathers, her eyes burning with a fanatical fire. In her hand, she held not a weapon, but a torch. "Behold," she shrieked, her voice silencing the hall, "the cursed union, the thorn and the fang. Look at them and see the ruin they bring. My pack, my family, shattered. My son, driven mad, all for this abomination against nature." She pointed the torch at a tapestry on the wall, one depicting the first Thorn Alpha. "This ends tonight. The Thorn line ends tonight." She flung the torch. It flew toward the tapestry, toward the ancient dry wool, but it never hit. A small, silver-furred wolf, my wolf, leaped from the high balcony, a desperate, impossible jump. I shifted mid-air, hitting the ground between the torch and the tapestry. I didn't catch it, I smothered it with my own body, rolling, the flames searing my side before they were crushed out against the stone floor. Silence. Then pain, sharp and real. I looked up, human again, clutching my burned side. Celeste stared at me, stunned. Her grand gesture, her symbolic act of war, had been thwarted not by the mighty Alpha King, but by his Luna throwing herself on a fire. Kalen was at my side in an instant, his hands gentle as he helped me up. His rage at Celeste was a palpable heat in the air. But I held up a hand, my eyes on the broken woman in the doorway. "You speak of ruin, Celeste, but you crafted it. You and your husband and your son. You ruined your pack from the inside with greed. Your son tried to ruin me with cruelty, and now you try to ruin this," I gestured between Kalen and me, "with hate. This cycle ends here, not with more fire, not with more blood." I took a painful step towards her. The gathered packs watched, breathless. "You have lost, but you do not have to die in the losing. Surrender. End this." For a long moment, she stood there, a statue of hatred. Then her eyes found Asher, lurking in the shadows behind her. Her son, now a hollow-eyed specter of his former self. She saw the futility in his gaze, the madness, the end of her line. The torch fell from her hand, clattering on the stone. She didn't surrender, she simply broke. Her shoulders slumped, the fire in her eyes guttered out, leaving only ash. She turned and walked into the night, into the waiting custody of the council guards, Asher shuffling silently behind her. It was over. The true silence that followed was not of fear, but of awe. They had seen an Alpha King's might, but they had also seen a Luna's courage, not the courage to kill, but the courage to endure, to protect, to end a war by refusing to fight it on terms of hatred. As Kalen led me away to be healed, I felt the gazes of the packs upon us, not with fear or doubt, with respect. The Thorn King and his Luna were not a curse. They were the heart that had finally stopped the bleeding. Spring came softly to the mountains, wearing away the last patches of stubborn snow with gentle, persistent fingers. The scars of winter, both on the land and on our souls, were slowly healing. Celeste and Asher were imprisoned in separate, distant facilities where they could whisper their bitterness to stone walls that did not listen. The Silverfang Pack, under new and cautious leadership appointed by the council, began the slow, painful work of rebuilding with restored funds. Some of our refugees chose to return, carrying with them new skills and the unshakable knowledge that sanctuary existed should they ever need it again. Thorn Hall was different. The stone was the same, the winds howled just as fiercely, but the air within was lighter. The fear was gone. In its place was a steady, humming purpose. My sanctuary wing was now simply part of the hall. We had healers, teachers, and craftsmen working there. It was no longer just a refuge, but a thriving part of our pack. Kalen was different too. The constant tension in his shoulders had eased. He smiled more, real smiles that reached his silver eyes. He spent less time in his study with maps of conflict and more time walking the high meadows with me, pointing out where the first wildflowers were bravely pushing through the thawed earth. Our bond was a deep, quiet river now, flowing steadily between us. It carried shared contentment, easy understanding, and a love that had grown not from a grand passion, but from shared trials, unwavering trust, and the daily choice to stand together. One such evening, we stood on the eastern balcony, watching the sunset paint the peaks in rose and gold. His arm was around my waist, my head resting against his shoulder. His voice was a rumble in his chest. "The council is pressuring me again," I said, touching the line of his jaw where his beard was coming in. "About what?" I asked, tracing the line of his jaw where his beard was coming in. "About what?" I asked, tracing the line of his jaw where his beard was coming in. "About an heir," he said, and I felt a flicker of playful amusement through the bond. "They say a kingdom needs stability, a confirmed line of succession." My heart did a funny little flip. We had never spoken directly of this. Our union had begun as so many things: strategy, survival, necessity. The future had always been a distant, hazy thing beyond the next threat. "And what does the king say?" I asked, keeping my voice light. He turned me to face him, his hands warm on my arms. His eyes were serious, but the warmth in them melted any lingering trace of winter inside me. "The king says that his kingdom has all the stability it needs in his Luna's heart, that his line of succession is secure in the legacy they are building together, one of justice, sanctuary, and pack." He brushed a stray hair from my cheek. "But the man hopes that one day, if his Luna is willing, their legacy might also include the sound of little paws running through these stone halls." Tears, sweet and unforced, pricked my eyes. "The Luna," I whispered, my voice thick, "thinks that sounds like the most beautiful legacy of all." He didn't kiss me. He pulled me into an embrace so complete, so full of quiet joy and promise, that it felt more intimate than any kiss could ever. I breathed in his scent, cedar, frost, and now, unmistakably, home. Later, as twilight deepened, we walked through the sanctuary garden I had insisted on planting. It was still mostly brown earth and hopeful plans, but in one sheltered corner, a cluster of hardy mountain blooms had taken root, their small, bright faces turned toward the last of the light. Kalen knelt, his large warrior's hand surprisingly gentle as he touched a petal. "It survived the frost," he said, with wonder in his voice. "The strongest things often do," I said, kneeling beside him. He looked from the flower to me, his silver eyes shining in the gloaming. "I have faith," he said simply, and in those 3 words I heard the vow of the rest of our lives. I had been left in the dark to die, discarded by a man who saw love as a transaction. I had been pulled from the snow by a man who saw loyalty as a chain. Together, we had learned a different truth, that love was not a transaction, but a choice renewed each day.
that loyalty was not a chain, but the root that lets the tallest tree stand firm against any storm. We were the thorn and the bloom, the protector and the sanctuary, the king and the heart of his kingdom. And as the first star appeared in the violet sky above Thorn Hall, I knew our story was no longer about survival or vengeance or even justice. It was simply and wonderfully about beginning. Peace, I discovered, was not a silent thing. It was the low hum of the loom in the weaving hall, the laughter of pups tumbling in the spring grass of the inner courtyard, the steady rhythm of the forge where new tools, not weapons, were being shaped. It was a sound woven from 100 quiet, contented threads. A year had passed since the Founders' Moon gathering. Thorn Hall was no longer just a fortress, it was a home that breathed. The sanctuary wing had officially been renamed Haven, and it was always full, not just with those in crisis, but with wolves learning trades, sharing stories, healing old wounds. It had become the heart of our territory, a place where the strength of the pack was measured in compassion as much as in claw. My days were full in a way that warmed my soul. Mornings were spent with Lyra and the pack stewards, managing supplies for the coming summer. Afternoons were often in Haven, my old friend Alara now helping me run it, her gentle wisdom a balm to many. And every evening, as the sun dipped behind the western peaks, I walked with Kaylin. Those walks were my anchor. We talked of everything and nothing, the health of the sheep in the high meadows, a new ballad the minstrels were singing, the stubborn weed that kept invading my kitchen garden. Through our bond, I felt his contentment, a deep, steady pull that had replaced the raging river of his former vigilance. Sometimes he would simply take my hand, his thumb brushing over my knuckles, a silent communication more eloquent than words. One such evening, we walked further than usual, following an old game trail that wound up behind the hall to a rocky outcrop that overlooked the entire valley. It was Kaylin's favorite place, his true sanctuary. "My father brought me here," he said, as we settled on a sun-warmed rock. The view was breathtaking, our territory rolling out in shades of green and gray, touched with the gold of the setting sun. He said a king must know what he protects, not just on a map, but the smell of the pine, the feel of the wind, the silence of the stones. I leaned against him, sharing his warmth. He was a wise man. "He was," Kaylin said softly, a note of old grief now softened by time in his voice. I wish he could have seen this, seen the hall not braced for war, but living. He looked down at me, his silver eyes tender. "I wish he could have met you." The love in his gaze, so open and unguarded, still had the power to steal my breath. We had built this peace, brick by brick, trust by trust. It was more precious to me than any crown. The peace was tested not by an old enemy, but by the mountain itself. It began with a rumble, so deep it was felt more than heard, a shudder in the very bones of the earth. Then came the rain, a relentless torrential downpour that lasted for 3 days, washing away tracks, swelling the river that curved around Thorn Hall's eastern side. On the 4th day, as the rain finally eased to a drizzle, a mudslide tore down the northern slope. It missed the hall itself, but buried the lower pastures, and more critically, the only bridge connecting our eastern farms to the main hall. The news came at a frantic run. "Luna, the Miller family, their homestead is on the east bank. The river is rising too fast. They're cut off. Old man Miller's leg is bad. He can't swim it now." Kaylin was already buckling on his sword belt, his face the focused mask of the Alpha King once more, but without the old anger. This was a different kind of battle. "Garrett, take a team upriver, see if you can ford it. I'll go to the bluff and assess." "I'm coming with you," I said, already reaching for a stout cloak. He didn't argue, he just nodded. From the bluff, the situation was grim. The usually placid river was a snarling brown beast, devouring its banks. The remains of the wooden bridge stuck out like broken teeth. On the far side, we could just make out the mill house, smoke curling from its chimney, a desperate signal. "The ford will be impassable," Garrett reported, returning soaked and grim. "The current would sweep a horse away." Kalen stared at the rushing water, his mind working. I felt the familiar surge of his protective instinct, but it was tempered now by strategy, not fear. "We need rope, a lot of it, and the winch from the old quarry." A plan formed. They would use the winch to launch a rope across the river, anchored to the old bridge pier on our side and the sturdy mill wheel housing on the other. It was dangerous, desperate, but it was all we had. Every able-bodied wolf worked. The rain began again, a cold, driving curtain. I worked alongside them, hauling rope, securing knots, handing out hot, fortified broth to shivering warriors. I was their Luna, not just in title, but in the mud beside them. Kalen was everywhere, his voice calm and sure, directing the operation. When it came time to fire the heavy, rope-wrapped grappling hook across the raging water, it was he who took the shot. The winch groaned, the rope hissed through the rain, and the hook sailed in a great arc, catching firmly in the mill wheel frame. A cheer went up, quickly swallowed by the storm. But getting across was another matter. The rope sagged dangerously over the furious water. It would take immense strength to pull oneself across, hand over hand, against the wind and the spray. "I'll go," Kalen said, already tying a safety line around his waist. "No," the word came from me, firm. All eyes turned to me. "You are the king. Your strength is needed here, to lead, to anchor them." I looked at the rope, then at the terrified faces of the Miller family barely visible across the way. "I am the lightest, and I am not afraid." I saw the protest in Kalen's eyes, the instinctive no, but I also saw the respect, the trust we had forged. He knew I wasn't being reckless. I was being what our pack needed. He stepped close, his hands on my shoulders. "The bond," he said, low, for me alone. "I will be with you every inch. If you falter, I will feel it. We will pull you back." I nodded, my throat tight. He tied the safety line himself, his knots sure and strong. Then, without ceremony, I grasped the wet, thick rope and launched myself into the void. The world narrowed to the burn in my arms, the slap of icy water on my legs, the howl of the wind. The rope swayed violently. Below me, the river roared, hungry. Fear was a cold knot in my stomach. But through the bond, I didn't feel Kalen's fear. I felt his absolute focus, his unwavering strength flowing into me, a psychic anchor. "I am here. You are strong. Pull." Hand over hand, breath by breath. The far bank seemed to inch closer. My muscles screamed, my hands grew numb. Just as I thought I could go no further, strong hands reached out from the mill's landing, grabbing my arms, hauling me to solid ground. It was Miller's eldest son, his face white with relief. I untied the rope from my waist and quickly secured it to a heavy post. "Get the pulley on, quickly!" Within an hour, we had a makeshift zip-line system. One by one, the Miller family, the old man strapped securely to a sled, were pulled to safety, the last pup, a little girl, clinging to me as we swept over the raging water, her face buried in my neck. When my feet touched the ground on the home side, I collapsed into Kalen's waiting arms. He held me tightly, his body trembling not from fear, but from a potent mix of pride and residual adrenaline. He didn't speak. He just held me, his face buried in my wet hair, as the pack around us cheered, not for a king's victory in battle, but for a pack's victory over the storm. Later, warm and dry by the great hall fire, Kalen looked at me, his eyes reflecting the flames. "You crossed a river for them." I said simply, "They are our pack." He took my hand, his thumb tracing the fresh blisters on my palm. "You are the bridge, Syra, between my past and our future, between this stronghold and the hearts of our people. He brought my hand to his lips, a gesture so tender that it made my heart ache. My fierce, gentle, extraordinary Luna. The peace was tested, not by an old enemy, but by the mountain itself. 5 years. The words settled in my mind as I stood on the same eastern balcony, watching a sunrise that painted the world in hopeful gold. Thorn Hall sang with life. The sound was no longer a whisper, but a vibrant, joyful chorus. And the loudest part of that chorus was currently trying to braid the fur of a very patient, very large wolf. "Papa, hold still. The sunshine needs a crown." Kalen, seated cross-legged on the stone floor, obediently bowed his head as our 4-year-old daughter, Ilara, named for the brave widow who was now her honorary grandmother, wove dandelions and clover into his dark hair. His face, once so stern, was soft with a love so profound that it still stole my breath. Our son, Kieran, a sturdy 2-year-old with my silver eyes and his father's serious brow, was attempting to help by piling more flowers onto his father's lap.
The scene filled me with a warmth so complete it was almost painful. This was the legacy, not of stone and sword, but of laughter and light. The kingdom was thriving. The sanctuary model from Haven had been adopted by 3 more territories. Trade flowed peacefully where once there had been suspicion. The memory of the Hunter War was a cautionary tale in history lessons, not a fresh wound. I felt a presence at my shoulder and turned. Kalen had escaped his floral coronation, leaving the pups in the delighted care of Lyra. He slipped his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on my head. "Remembering?" he murmured, his voice a vibration against my back. "Always," I said, leaning into him, and marveling. Below, in the courtyard, a ceremony was beginning, not a mating or a marking, but a graduation. The first class of youngsters from our new pack school, children of warriors, farmers, artisans, and sanctuary refugees alike, were receiving their tokens of adulthood. Among them was Tamlin, the blind Omega who had been threatened years ago. He was being honored for his mastery of woodcraft and his gifted hands that could carve beauty from plain wood. He stood tall, a smile of pure joy on his face as the pack cheered for him. "We did that," I whispered. "You did that," Kalen corrected gently, turning me to face him. His silver eyes, framed by laugh lines that were my favorite new feature, held me. "You saw the strength they had. I just helped you build the place where they could show it." He was wrong, and we both knew it. It had been our partnership, our combined strengths, his unwavering defense, my unyielding compassion, that had built this world. "The council is coming next week," he said, a playful glint in his eye. "They will, no doubt, fuss about formalities and treaties again." I smiled. "And you will listen patiently, and then take them to see the new foals in the high meadow, and they will remember that kingdoms are about life, not just paperwork." He laughed, a rich, free sound that echoed off the stones. My wise Luna. He grew quiet then, his gaze traveling over my face as if memorizing it anew. "Do you ever wonder, what if I hadn't stopped on that road?" I reached up and touched the mate mark on his throat, my own glowing in response. "Always," I said, leaning into him, and marveling. Below, in the courtyard, a ceremony was ending with a joyful howl that was taken up by the entire pack, a song of celebration and belonging that rose to the skies. Our children, hearing it, abandoned their flowers and ran to the balcony wall, adding their tiny, fierce howls to the chorus. Kalen and I stood together, wrapped in each other and in the sound of our pack's happiness. The journey had been long, from the frozen darkness of betrayal to this sun-drenched peak of contentment. We had faced enemies within and without, the wrath of nature and the ghosts of the past. We had been saved by a choice, bound by a mark, and tested by fire and flood.
And we emerged not just as mates or as king and queen, but as two halves of a single, unshakable truth, that love is not a weakness, but the source of ultimate strength, that a pack is strongest when it protects its most vulnerable, that a new beginning is always possible, no matter how deep the winter. I looked at my mate, at our children, at our thriving pack, and I knew with absolute certainty the answer to the question that had started it all, the question the viewers might ask themselves. Would you accept help from your greatest enemy? My heart, full to bursting, answered. If that enemy has eyes of silver that learn to glow with warmth, if his hands, shaped for war, learn to cradle flowers and children with infinite care, if his heart, locked in a fortress of ice, thaws to create a sanctuary for all, then yes, 1,000 times yes. For that is not accepting help from an enemy, that is discovering your destiny, that is finding your home. And our story, like the first brave blooms on the mountainside, was just beginning to show its true, beautiful colors.